And here we are. Welcome back, everybody. I have here with me co-host of the School Leadership Show, Jen David Lang. Hey, Jen, how are you?
So good to be talking with you again. It's been too long.
It's been a long time since we rock and rolled, but here we are with part two of our conversation about the distance learning playbook. So, our last episode was about the first part of the book, and now we're going to jump right in with the second part. Do you want to give any preamble about the book in general in case folks are picking up this episode before its predecessor?
Absolutely. Well, this is just the book to read if you have any type of distance or hybrid learning going on in your school. It's called the Distance Learning Grade Playbook for grades K to 12, and it's written by Douglas Fisher, Nancy Fry, and John Hattie. And they did a tremendous job of doing a bit of research about what's working with distance learning and applying it to what we already know about good teaching and learning. And it's a fantastic resource for this difficult time that we're all in.
So maybe let's just briefly mention the first four so that folks know what they are, and then we'll move on to the fifth one.
Sure. So each chapter is called a module. And the first chapter is about teachers, how they can better take care of themselves. If you don't put an oxygen mask on yourself, you can't help your students. The second module is called the first days of school, but it's really about setting up routines and procedures because learning online is different. So even if you're starting in March or September or now in January, you don't have rules, procedures, norms in place. That's very important. The third module is about the teacher-student relationships from a distance. We know relationships are important. They're even more important from a distance. So there is a chapter on that. And then the fourth chapter is about teacher credibility at a distance. Research shows students learn more if they believe they can learn from you. So how do you develop that teacher credibility when you are teaching through a screen?
Perfect. And now we're going to dig deeply into the next one. So module 5, teacher clarity at a distance. So this has been popping up lately in many of the different things I've been reading. And it's interesting to me that, well, not interesting, I think it's telling that clarity is an important piece. Do you want to kind of talk about what the authors say about it?
Sure. Like other topics, right? Teacher clarity has always been important, but now it's even more important when you're teaching through a screen because students don't have a lot of those other cues they used to have, the cues around their physical classroom. They can't see some of the subtle facial expressions. So teacher clarity is even more important now. And so the book includes sort of 5 aspects of teacher clarity. I won't go into all of them right now. I have a summary of this. If you want to take a look, I'm happy to share it. The first part of teacher clarity is the teacher's own clarity about his or her understanding of the standards. And, with everything going on, if at all possible, if you're a school leader listening out there and you have the capability of focusing just on a few power standards rather than trying to ram students through all of them, that's really going to help with teacher clarity because then teachers only really need to take a deep dive on those fewer standards.
Well, and I think this focus on clarity and really starting with the standards that matter or focusing on the standards that matter is necessarily going to narrow down what is taught or what is quote unquote covered. I hate that term, but
yeah.
I think it's going to force people to prioritize their standards, which is something that we have been preaching and pushing people toward since there were standards.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's something, who was it? Robert Marzano, somebody said if we actually taught all the standards that students needed to learn, they'd be in school until they were 27, something like that.
Exactly. Yep.
So absolutely. But yeah, and obviously teacher clarity is about students really understanding what they need to learn, right? So, you could put together a very simple chart of this week's learning intentions and just put it in student-friendly language, like I can find factual information in a text, and have them think about before and after. Before you've taught anything, do they understand how to find factual information from a text? And then after, make it really clear what they're supposed to learn. I love the idea because things are so confusing right now, especially for teachers of elementary school, but also middle. It could even be high school. The idea of a one-pager, a distance learning weekly planner where everything the student needs to do for the week is on a page. So if you can imagine, there's a column for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and each column is very clear. As the student, what do I need to attend on Monday? What do I need to read? What do I need to watch, discuss, and what do I need to turn in? Same thing for Tuesday. What do I need to attend, read, watch, discuss, and turn in? Make it very clear what has to happen each day. And then maybe at the top of the page, what are this week's learning goals? What are this week's overall tasks or assessments? And what are the success criteria for the week? Imagine if all of our teachers put all of that on one page. Think of how clear that would be for the teacher, for the students, and for the parents at home who are trying to support their children.
I think that is such a spectacular strategy, and I just hear these old school people in my head from my past saying, well, then how will the students learn how to do this organization on their own if we do it for them? Well, I think it's time to get over that and realize that with everything that's going on, that this is a way to actually support students in their learning. So I think that's a spectacular strategy.
Yeah, and I think it helps teachers too, also to have it all in one place. But yeah, there are lots of ways that we need to be thinking about clarity as we plan our lessons.
So you want to move on to number 6?
Sure. Module 6 is all about engagement. Everybody knows that if students aren't engaged, they just can't learn, right? So one of the things in this chapter I like a lot is the way they define engagement. Because, as a school leader, you go into a classroom and you feel like, oh, there's not that much engagement. What does that mean, right? What is actually happening? And I love that there's a reference in this chapter to a continuum of 6 different levels of engagement. So the most disengaged is at the disrupting level. You're disrupting others or your own learning. Then a little better is just avoiding. You're engaged in some type of off-task behavior.
Right, like you've got another screen off to the side watching Netflix or something.
Exactly, very common. I've seen that in my own house. Then after disrupting and avoiding, then just withdrawing. Physically, emotionally, not really tuning in. And then we flip to the next level, which is actually participating, right? Doing some work and paying attention. And you would think that's it, but no, there's 2 other levels. After that is investing, right? Is the student posing questions, really appreciating the learning? And then finally, the very top level of engagement is when you're driving the learning. Are you seeking feedback? Are you self-assessing? Are you setting your own goals? So this is a much clearer way of understanding what kind of engagement is happening in our classrooms and really thinking about not trying to get from level 1 to level 6 for some students, but maybe we can try to move from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. So I love this continuum, and I think we can use it post-pandemic as well.
Absolutely. And I would argue, I know all of these modules, all these ideas are important in this book, but I feel like engagement, and then how it bleeds into the next one, which we're going to talk about in terms of quality instruction, how critical this is, because the more I've seen, or the more I see over the last few months, year that we've been doing this, is this, we kind of get in the beginning, it was okay, just get everybody connected and get into it and just do it. And then now I think people are starting to step back a little bit and look at what is the what is the experience, the actual experience of the end user on the other end? What is this student experiencing? Is it the scenario where half the class is at home, the other half of the class is in person. The teacher's got a Chromebook on a music stand in the front of the room and is trying to do both things simultaneously, remote and in person, and neither is going well. And I think this is so important to this process.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and also you and I are recording this in January, and people are burnt out. Students are really, we know teachers have had enough, but there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. The students are just exhausted. So I think it's key what you just said, Mike, about thinking about the user experience. I just put together for the main idea a list of 30 strategies to engage students on Zoom. It's based on a book that I read. I'm happy to send it to your listeners if they send me an email. But we need to really we're only in January and we may be remote or hybrid through the end of the school year. So we need to think of ways to engage students more. And the book suggests that we really think about designing tasks with engagement in mind. And honestly, thinking this way is only going to help our teachers' instruction post-pandemic as well. So they suggest we think about tasks that are open tasks. I'm a former math teacher. So instead of asking students, what's 8 plus 12, you can open it up and have students think of what are all the sums of numbers that get to 20. But even better than that, I like it something even more open. Say to students, I'm giving you $20 to spend online. What are different combinations of snacks you could buy? And that really opens it up. Students poke around online. Some go for those expensive snacks they would never treat themselves to, or other kids go for quantity instead of quality. So really opening up tasks before you assign it. And also think about problem solving tasks, getting kids to really solve problems. I read this quote recently, I think it was yesterday, that the only reason humans really have to think is when we need to solve a problem. Think about that, right? That's the only time we really need to think.
It's
So
true.
can you really give your students a problem to solve to get them engaged? So I think we do have to rethink our tasks now, and as well as in person, to get students to engage more.
Well, and as we talk, I don't know whether to be affirmed and happy or unbelievably frustrated, because the things that we're talking about being good practice have
Mm-hmm.
always been good practice.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I definitely am not beating on teachers, because I know people are just crushed out there trying to do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there were things, and you were a teacher, I was a teacher,
Yeah.
I taught math also. There were things that I could get away with in the classroom as a teacher that I couldn't get away with online right now. And I think that's part of what I hope comes from this in a good way, is that really thoughtful approach to planning, that's problem based, that is, where you think about engagement as part of your planning versus, okay, here's, I'm going to stand up and teach and here's what I'm doing.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening is teachers are learning a lot about a lot of different tech tools, right? And tech tools don't inherently engage students, but tech tools do allow for more students to participate at the same time, which we know boosts engagement. And students also like technology. So I think that there's a lot of promise for weaving in all these new tools that we've learned, Padlet, Quizlet, Storyboard, all of these programs to use them later after the pandemic as well to really help engagement.
So I really think, and that kind of leads nicely into the next module, number 7, around quality instruction for distance learning. And you alluded to that other book, the 30 Strategies book. That might be one we tackle later, because I'm absolutely intrigued by that. Not that I'm teaching students directly anymore, but I find that a lot of those strategies that work for students work for adults in meetings, because the same unpleasantness that students are experiencing remotely is what adults are experiencing too. So let's talk about quality of instruction. And they have a framework that includes 4 different parts. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I like the way, quality instruction is huge, right? What is good instruction? But I like that they break it down into 4 different parts. I'll just name the 4 parts and then we'll talk about them. Demonstrating, collaborating, coaching and facilitating, and practicing. And I think what they're saying is that good instruction involves a combination of the 4. So as I'm describing these, if you are a school leader, instructional coach, and you've been visiting classes, think to yourself, have you seen more of one of these than the others? Because there really should be a balance. So the first one, demonstrating. That's when the teacher is demonstrating, in front of the students what they should learn, what they should do. And I think, unfortunately, we see a lot of this. There's nothing wrong with demonstrating, but it's more like lecturing. It should be one of several strategies that teachers use. And I think I've seen a lot of demonstrating in this remote instructional time. The second part is collaborating.
But before,
Jen,
oh,
you want to say more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before we leave demonstrating, though,
yeah.
I wonder if that's something that comes out of this, is if folks start to see that the demonstration part of it isn't the big deal. Isn't the most important thing. So does the demonstration piece of it become something that can be done asynchronously, even when you're back in school? I think about the early days of flipped instruction, right? And the folks that were able to make it work, a lot of the things they would have kids do at home would be the things that could be done asynchronously, like a demonstration, or in science, some kind of discrepant event or whatever, where it didn't require a lot of interaction between the teacher and the student, so that you maximize that next one, the next couple, the collaboration time, the coaching, facilitating, the practicing. Like, that is how you prioritize your synchronous or your in-person time.
Absolutely. I think that what's happening now is that students who used to have math, let's say 5 times a week live, now they're having 2 or 3 synchronous meetings a week, just because of the way schedules are working. So teachers are realizing, I don't have as much time, but I still have a lot to teach. So they are taking those demonstration pieces, like you say, and they're flipping them. They're creating videos of themselves, using online videos, or readings, or giving students something that they can do on their own. And the other piece we should mention that's useful about that flipping is then students who need to hear something or watch something a second time, they can do that. Whereas if you have that live instruction and the teacher's going too fast, or you spaced out for a minute, you can't rewind that.
And I would say the other thing to go along with that is, and we talked about this before, one of the things that keeps me up at night is teacher burnout. And I have several friends, many friends who are teachers at all different levels, and I watch how hard they're working, how they are killing themselves to prepare and create and everything. But I was having a conversation with a 2nd grade teacher friend of mine, and she said she's been so overwhelmed that she and her colleagues finally got themselves to the place where they are sharing their videos, so that not every teacher has to create every video herself. If Chrissy has a good video on 2-digit addition and Brian has a good one on subtraction, they can use each other's, and they're finally at a place where, and I think it came out of just sheer necessity, like they couldn't do it. So, and then once they realized that, okay, you trust your colleagues to produce quality work, so let's share it and use it. And by the way, later, once it's done, it's done. So that's another hope I have, that some of this asynchronous material and content that gets created and that people find to be effective, they have to use later, so that later, when we are back, however we're back, that the focus and the effort can be on the synchronous pieces and assessment and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do hope they're saving those videos and using them. And I was in a session with Doug Fisher, and he also said he's hoping teachers are not going to be perfectionist about these videos. There's something about recording ourselves that we feel like we have to be perfect. It's perfectly fine to flub a line and then say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say, 5 + 6 was 10, it's 11." Let your students see that you're human, and do not go for perfection with these videos, is what he's hoping.
Which is a nice thing to say, but we think about all the teachers, and you and I, present company included.
Yeah.
A lot of us, we are perfectionists. That's hard. It's hard to break, but I get it.
Yeah, but if there's any time to let that perfectionist side slide a little, it's now, because like you said, people are recording videos every week, and it's a lot of work. But anyway, so that's one part of quality instruction, is the demonstrating piece. The collaborating piece is really dialogue, not just between you as the teacher and the students in a ping pong kind of way, but also among students. And, the effect size for a class discussion is 0.82. That means that students can learn twice as much by having good discussions in their classrooms. So, when I've seen some classes, distance classes, I still am seeing the teacher ask a question, student answer, teacher respond, teacher ask another question, student answer, teacher respond. But really, there's so many ways to foster collaboration, use those breakout rooms, and really let students talk to each other. They're dying to talk to each other. And this is a key piece that will also, going back to the engagement, help with the engagement. So it helps with the learning, and it also helps with the engagement. So, the mindset teachers need to develop is, I engage as much in dialogue as monologue. And think, can your teachers really say that they are supporting dialogue as much as monologue in their classrooms?
Or more than monologue? How about let's tip the scale that way, so that the kids are doing the work. And I think this leads nicely into the third one, this idea of coaching and facilitating.
Yeah, I like that. A lot of teachers don't think of themselves as coaching, but they really are, right? I mean, when teachers ask questions to probe students, they really are, they're coaching them and questioning them. And again, this goes back to engagement. If we can get more than one student to respond at a time, preferably all of them, then students are going to be more engaged, right? So do you have the technology to use, Nearpod or Pear Deck or the chat in Zoom to ask a question and have all students answer? They're going to be so much more engaged than just having one, and it doesn't have to be technology, right? You can ask a question and have everyone in your class with paper and pen in front of them write an answer simultaneously, and then participation increases and learning increases. So really think about coaching, facilitating learning. I speak Spanish, fácil, easy, right? You're trying to make it easier. You're supporting them in their learning and in their growth. Maybe you don't have all of your students in your main session at the same time. One cool thing I learned is that if you use a video platform like Zoom, you actually have 3 spaces. You have the main room where maybe you do have a larger group discussion. You have the breakouts where maybe you have pairs or triads chatting. And you also have the waiting room. So maybe students are doing a little bit of practicing. That's the 4th item in the quality instruction.
Ooh, nice segue there, Jen. That was really good.
That was good. But yeah, how often do we have our students practice, right? If you teach any type of humanities, how much do your students actually read or write in class, right? It's crazy. We're teaching reading and writing, but students aren't doing reading or writing. When you're teaching math, we do have a little bit more of students doing math, but give them time to do the math. They have to practice. Students can't learn unless they practice.
And which also, ties into where we're headed next, because what we know about deliberate practice is that the best kind of practice, deliberate practice, involves practice under the watchful eye of a knowledgeable coach who can give you feedback. So talk about module 8, feedback, assessment, and grading.
Yeah, the last module we're going to talk about here. So it's a huge topic that they do in one chapter, feedback, assessment, and grading. I mean, people have written 400-page books about these topics. I really want to focus on the formative assessment aspect of this chapter. I'm a huge fan of formative assessment because of the research. That research basically says when it's done well, formative assessment doubles student learning. So meaning if Mike is doing formative assessment well in his class and I'm not doing it at all, his students can learn twice as much as the students in my class. And that's really powerful. But what does it mean to do it well? Well, part of it, as you said, is giving good feedback, giving good descriptive feedback. That's not, oh, you wrote this essay, B, or, oh, you took this math test, 8 out of 10, 80%. But it's really pointing the learner to what she did correctly and what she could improve, really having descriptive feedback. The other piece is giving formative assessments, but then using the results. So what I've seen a lot of is teachers do some type of checking for understanding, but then they don't take the next step, which is to adjust their lessons based on how much students are learning, right? So, you could check in, okay, for homework for number 2, how many got 7.6 as the answer? If 90% of your students got 7.6 as the answer, then don't go over that, right? Skip to another part of the lesson plan. And there certainly are lots of ways to do formative assessment online and with technology, that we couldn't have done before, right? You can do a lot of those polls. You can do Zoom polls. You can do Kahoots. You can anonymously ask students questions and see, 80% of the students understand what I'm teaching right now. I can move on. Or 20% of the students got this question right. Let me go over it again in a different way. So there are all of these possibilities to do online polls. You can do virtual exit slips where at the end of a lesson, you poll students or you ask a question that they can turn in online. There's lots of ways to poll our students and see what they know, but then we should be using that to inform our instruction, which is the final piece.
And you made the point earlier, and I think it's worth making again, that a lot of these tools that you're describing, teachers are having to use by necessity because they're real. I can't collect a paper exit slip from everybody. So,
right.
So I think, in my hope, and I think you said it before, is that teachers develop some facility with these online tools that then when they are able to be back in person, they're still able to use them and integrate them in a way that is effective. And I think, I don't know, I just think if we could take the good things that people are learning and accomplishing and doing as teachers in these settings and translate them into what comes next, I think the whole field takes a leap forward.
Absolutely. And teachers may choose to do some more online instruction because of these benefits, right? In a typical class, if I want to see if students understand the main idea of this paragraph, right? If I have to walk around to 32 desks and look at what people wrote down, that takes a long time. But if I could have everybody in the chat write down what they think is the main idea of a paragraph, I can see it in seconds. And so, or, if I give a quick quiz, what's 5 plus 6? Hopefully you're not giving such a silly quiz, but I can quickly see if students have mastered this. So I hope that teachers will use some of these tools later just to get more information from more students more frequently.
So, Jen, I want to be respectful of people's time, including your time. So, any overall or parting shots based on this work?
I mean, I think that at first it was very intimidating for a lot of teachers to do this type of distance learning. But what the authors of the book say is that teachers know what good instruction is, right? There's research out there, they've been doing it before. And really, rather than thinking of distance learning as a whole relearning and doing everything from scratch, no, it's really just small shifts, right? You wanted to engage students before, now you're going to engage them online. You wanted to incorporate some of these aspects of quality instruction before, now you're doing it online. So really, it's more of a small shift rather than starting completely from scratch, and that, teachers have this, they can do this.
I could not agree more. And I think as I watch my friends who are navigating this, I think that one of the points you made earlier is also worth making again, is that perfection can be the enemy of effective.
I agree.
And I think if folks cut themselves some slack and focus on the things that are working, and focus on just a few tools that they have found that they can learn to use and be effective with, like I said before, I'll say it again. I think we have a real opportunity here to move our field forward in a way that we just haven't in the past. So, Jen, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your time and for your spectacular summary. And I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes, that if folks email you, you'll send them a copy of the summary of this book, The Distance Learning Playbook, Grades K through 12, Teaching for Engagement and Impact in Any Setting, by the dream team of Douglas Fisher, Nancy Fry, and John Hattie. And then the other one too, the 30 Strategies to Engage Students on Zoom. So thank you again, as always, and we'll come up with whatever we're going to do next, because I basically don't want to do this anymore without you. So I think that's the plan.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Thanks so much. I appreciate the kind words. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.